Okay, almost there. All right. So, as I said to the people who came on a moment ago, my name is Rachel Reeves. I am a manager of a team that runs a couple of different training grants, and we are in the process of writing a renewal and considering is there a different way that we can think about the people who are coordinating the grant and their role and the work that they're doing? Because every time we come to the point that we're writing this, we're pressed to examine could we be doing more? And could we be doing differently? And we had this conversation across administrative coordinators of training grants at UC Davis. And like I shared, there was just wide variability in all of this. So if you're open to it, please consider answering the prompts in the chat. I'd be really interested in hearing what kind of working titles people have, what kind of payroll titles people have. Wow. Um, okay, I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the did everyone else find themselves suddenly in a lecture hall? Okay, all right, thank you. Are there any of these points on which someone would like to engage first?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Uh, Alex Lopez from UC Davis as well.
Hi,
I'm
Alex.
just, hi, good to see you and everyone here. I appreciate this conversation. It's something um, as a T32 coordinator with an HR background, I think I tend to be
Mhm.
more of an outlier where I have less finance background, but I have more HR background, which unexpectedly became beneficial over the past few years. But I
Mhm.
think what I appreciate this, especially in this conversation, is I didn't even realize the differences and how um, uh, sure, a lot of T32 coordinators are about how their role is similar or the same to other roles. And I think that's been, maybe that's something that's been passed down through T32 coordination or administration, or it could come from PIs. I don't know. But I think it also is an indicator of not just how can we connect and share resources, but I think it also illustrates how we struggle sometimes to communicate within our community, which we're seeing there are ripples of that, of how we're trying to communicate to entities like UCOP and our respective campuses about the value of T32. Um, so
Mhm.
that's where I'm grateful. I don't know if that's where you were looking to kick off. I can share that I'm an admin officer too. My position was unionized within this role, which has added complications, in
Mm.
regards of how we plan. I'm also part-time, which is where I'm an outlier. I am completely focused on the T32, but as I mentioned, I do not do the finance. We have a finance analyst that supports on that. And so that's where I knew coming in I was an outlier. But we are a dynamic landscape is how I like to think about it instead, and that be it academic coordinators, staff coordinators, um, other academic positions, that I think is a unique trait and strength that can be further understood to showcase the strength of the T32.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, something you touched on something else that I wanted to check in about, which is that we're receiving advice. We've received advice from a number of different quarters that it's good grantsmanship for us to have a full-time one FTE on every training grant, and that is certainly not the way that we have run things previously. Our T32 Coordinator does many things. And that was really my expectation until I received this suggestion from from our external advisory board and from our uh, our grants facilitation professionals at the university. So I would welcome a conversation just about like how many programs are you juggling? Or am I the only person who has a multi program administrator?
I can chime in.
Thank
I I work with only the pre-award section, not the post-award,
you. Hmm.
the training grant. But I used to work with the whole campus, but now I only work with two schools. And my role is to help the PIs prepare with the tables, to make sure that they know all the updates of the NIH. And also, because my background is in science, so I help them review as well. And I do help out with the writing. So it's kind of like a lot. What's more, something that I cannot do is, as you know, every training grant has about 30, 25, or like a lot of PIs. And when we have, especially May submission becomes impossible to review everything and help out with a lot of things, including the biosketch. So that's a problem because I cannot take a look at the biosketch and the tables, and so that it becomes a lot. But when it comes to the post-award, a lot of the people that manage them are not, there is no one FTE per training grant that I know of. So everybody does a lot of things, including just managing the training grants. So one FTE for per training grant would be an ideal one. So that might happen one day, but I don't know anyone who just works on a training grant. Yeah, so
Thank you for sharing that.
sure.
Here at UCLA, my title, I'm Senior Program Manager for Training Grants. We have a special group called the Grants Missions Unit that's focused just on the pre-award process and supporting administrative elements that are not the budget or post-award. So that's still outside of our scope of work. And so we handle data tables for some of the projects based on our capacity. At UCLA, we have over 35 training grants. And so for the May submission period, where we currently have been contacted by 7 different teams, and there's potentially like 15 grants that could go in May. And so, part of our the challenge for us is to juggle what we are able to support based on kind of Dean's office priorities. But renewals in particular usually have some kind of pre-existing post-award administrative structure that we then will work together alongside the existing structure to help where we can or with what they need. And so that may be, doing all of the data tables, or it may be reviewing bio sketches or drafting letters of support, or just, providing a layman's review for consistency of the grant if provided enough time. And so that structure has worked well for us for the past, our training grant program has been in existence for the past 3 years, but this grant submission structure has been around for much longer than that. And in addition to that, as part of our launching of this training grant team within the grant submissions unit, we launched a survey to our faculty and administrative community to determine what the greatest support needs were at UCLA in order to prioritize and focus our support services. And far and away, just data table help was obviously in most need. And so for us, that looks like not only for those high priority projects where we do the whole kit and caboodle, but we've also spent a lot of time in developing workshops and online tools and web pages and videos and explainers and templates and toolkits and just office hours one-on-one meetings to help not only disseminate information, but I'm also hopeful to build like the community of training grant peers, so that if I'm out sick or, you know, somebody oftentimes doesn't even know what other people in their own department are doing. And so they might be able to identify that key peer within their department that can help them. So the data tables were the number one service. Where we also, what has helped us kind of manage our workload and expectation and communicating with our faculty members and other administrative teams is to draft just like a brief MOU, I think memorandum of understanding. And our general GSU team doesn't typically do this for other grants because they're much smaller, but we found because of the complexity of training grants, it really helps ease the communication early on, and divide the labor to sit down and have that kickoff meeting to discuss like, this is your checklist, your timeline, this is everything that needs to happen. How are we going to do this? And so like our team can do this, but who else are you pulling in or can you tap, or are you aware that you as the PI need to write XYZ? And so much of our work over the past 3 years, I think, is just general like PR about how much time and effort and administrative burden there is for these grants and how important it is to get started early. Because I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that there's a lot of turnover in these training grant, administratives and support structures because they're so hard. And not a lot of people have good experiences on their first go around. And so, trying to create those support structures, but also just make the PIs aware of how much time is really needed from the administrative standpoint to set their admins up for success.
Ellie, I'm hearing turnover among the staff administrators of the programs. Is that correct?
I think like writ large, yes. And if not turnover per se in the department, but somebody might submit that T32 and then 5 years comes around and they're no longer required to submit that, but they're not raising their hand to do it. They're passing it on to the next person,
Okay.
because it was so challenging that first time. And yeah.
Okay, so turnover among the PIs as well.
Yeah, I would say so. It's not as bad as the staff, but the incentives that we've discussed on previous meetings are hard for the PIs, and they're high level conversations at UCLA about what kind of supports and incentive structures can be in place to help the PIs make sure that they get what they need. And one of which is our team. We're free, and if given enough time, hopefully we can help ease a lot of just the day-to-day administrative hurdles that are in place.
Thank you. I'd be really interested to hear from other scholar-facing, post-award, scholar-facing, PI supporting coordinators in the room.
I can chime in a little bit.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Rachel. Hello, I'm Brooke. I'm new to this group, so nice to meet you all. Thank you all for having me. I'm with UC Irvine, the UCI CTSA, the Institute for Clinical and Translational Science. I'm with, I'm part of the Workforce Development Corps, so I'm the administrative manager for that unit. And Rachel, kind of similar to how you were sort of describing yourself initially, I would say that I also wear a lot of hats. So doing training grants and working on grants was not really ever in my job description, but was just something I started doing because of need. And luckily, UC Irvine does have people like Yurga who helps support the data tables and things like that. But there's other components that I still help with, like just basically amassing a bunch of other faculty information and assembling it in the nice little packaged way that NIH requires. Um, and yeah, I mean, I feel like at least at UC Irvine, I don't know if there are others on the call that can chime in on this as well, but a lot of the grants are administratively managed. I mean, I even do like some of the writing. Obviously, it's mostly written by the faculty PIs, but kind of along the lines of what Kelly was just saying, we just received our T32 postdoc for the CTSA package, and one of the PIs that was in the leadership is already talking about like a plan to move on and replace her, and like the award hasn't even started yet. So I think it's challenging when, especially for these T grants, there's just really no support for the PIs from the grant itself. It has to come from the institution, and that can often be challenging to get in terms of salary or time, etc. Um, but yeah, that's kind of been my experience. I mean, I've been doing the grants for a few years now, and I've been in my current role for about 5-ish years. But yeah, we don't really have a specific um, person who is just dedicated to working on the grants. I mean, we kind of do, but she only submits them. She doesn't really like sit with each faculty PI and like, work with them individually. I would say that we end up just sending her all of our documents and then she submits them rather than going through our sponsored projects team. So that's kind of been my experience at least.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear from anyone who does a lot of scholar-facing work.
Sure, I'll chime in because I'm Brooke's kind of counterpart here at UC Irvine, and I basically administer the programs, right? And it seems like I administer them a lot with very little faculty involvement, I would say. Sometimes it feels like that I do a lot of the heavy lifting. So as far as like the workshops, meeting with the scholars, our PIs are involved in that somewhat, but just like the day-to-day administering of the programs, I think that falls on my shoulders. Yeah, I don't really know what else to chime in. Our TL1 and KL2 programs are coming to an end, and like Brooke mentioned, our T32 will continue. But it's only going to support 2 postdocs, so it's much more limited than our TL1 program. I don't know if there's like specific questions that you want me to answer. I can't think off the top of my head like what else.
Are you doing curriculum design, Marguerite?
Yeah, I mean, we just finished up a workshop on mentoring, so it was a 7-session series. We're supposed to be doing like quarterly workshops, but we've been in grant writing mode for like 2 years now, so those are kind of put on hold. And then we also are supposed to be having like monthly brown bag sessions, but those tend to get canceled um, because they're not planned in ahead. I'm just kind of like at a point where like if the faculty doesn't want to plan something, like I'm not going to take it on my shoulders to plan it. So,
Mhm.
um, and then we also do an annual responsible conduct of research workshop. So we offer that and that I help to plan with one of our coordinators. And I think there's other workshops, but those are more like workforce development.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I dropped a few questions into the chat. I'm happy to drop those back in. Um, interested in, what is the variability among the way we talk about our work and like the content of our work as well. What like I'm always interested in like what is your relationship to the data tables? As well as like what is your relationship to the scholars, because Marguerite, what you're describing to me feels very different from what I'm seeing in my T32 program in terms of content, creating content and producing content.
Rachel, if I can chime in, I think you hit something there that I believe to be kind of and I know that's where the momentum, particularly with UC Davis T32 working groups, is going. But I think you hit it on the head of my work is very much connected with the trainees. It's a lot of maybe holistic advising, helping do event planning, retreat, that sort of thing, where we in our program, the PIs, the trainers, are more responsible for that, and our executive committee in supporting on the cross training or that sort of thing. But when I've talked to other T32 coordinators, they are not, understandably, I don't think most have the bandwidth to do some of the more student development aspect in regards of their experience, if it's not academic or research focused. And I think that is where existing T32s, to answer the question of how do we show we're doing more, I think of being able, where one thing we did was during COVID when the NIH rolled out the Resilient Scientist mental health program. We partnered with another T32 so that way we could offer more of the post discussion groups, right? And that made both of our programs look strong. And then they were like, you know what, Alex, you're a lot better at this. You have more bandwidth for it. Can you just handle this for our programs? Sure, no problem. That worked out. And I think that is, to use the phrase, what is it, to work hard at working smart. I think that would be a really great direction to start to figure out how can we, whether through RCR or things like that, start to have seminar series or something to help each other supplement in ways that maybe other programs can't offer.
Thank you, Alex. I tried to capture that in the chat. Coordinating programming and training across programs to kind of not recreate the wheel, not to put it on coordinators, individual programs to recreate the wheel.
Yes, exactly. I love that. We all have similar, if not the same, reporting standards. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea because I think that, if you have so many different training programs across campus and they're all required to have certain trainings or like brown bags or whatever it is that their program has to offer, why not have like an institutional office that can offer those sorts of trainings as opposed to each program having to put those on? I think it just makes a lot of sense to centralize some of those.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Carolina Gonzalez. I'm from UCSF, and I just entered in the world of T32s and programs. And I spend, I will say, like 100% of my time for about a month just trying to discover what were the things that we needed to set in place for the program to start, and appointments, and like you name it, all of it, because we just don't have resources in the institutions, and there's so many programs, so many T32s, but even just to understand who is doing what on each T32 and how those compare to each other. And I was talking to so many people who didn't know that other 32s were doing X, Y, or Z. They didn't know that they could do it themselves. It shocked me to realize that there was um, no platform for programs to communicate with each other. to learn from each other.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like knocking on doors and asking people to meet you and to share with you their information and knowledge. And I end up putting like a huge 32 page of like all of my findings that eventually I said I'm gonna like, clean it up and post it somewhere so that people can just try to find information, because it just is unbelievable that we can now find that type of information in an easier way. Yeah. So thank you for doing this group, and thank you for these calls. It's just, I'm very happy that there's at least the community, at least to have, the same sense or the feeling that, oh yes, we are in the same space. We're all struggling together. That at least feels good. I'm not the only one.
Shout out to Jill for her initiative here. She also holds, if I may, Jill, she also holds office hours, which have been a real safe safe place to go and find someone who can point you in the right direction. And we're working at UC Davis to we had our first meeting of our T32 administrators group, and we set up so we're going to do a quarterly meeting, but the lo we need some place where people can go and ask the embarrassing question, right? And say, like, I have no desk manual and I don't know, how do I do this? And so what we've done, and I really would like this to be that kind of space. What we've done is we've set up a listserv that people can speak back and forth. You can reply all to the listserv, and answer each other's questions that way. Because it is otherwise a pretty isolated experience.
Hi, Rachel. This is Christian Leva from UCSF as well. Hi, Carolina. You can feel free to contact me. I've been working with the CTSI here for 17 years now. So, and I'm very well versed in preparing the grants, especially the data tables, which is always exhausting and such a chore. But I wanted to mention, Rachel, you just said something. Oh my God, it's slipping my mind because I was introducing myself to Carolina. Um,
No
oh,
desk
do
manual.
does it for the listserv, is there a repository somewhere where everybody can go and review the notes, or is it just a conversation? Is it
No,
just a thread?
it's just right now it's just an email thread, but we're in the process of also building a T32 website. And for now, our plan is to house that at the CTSC, to house that in our CTSA hub website, just because we have the bandwidth at this moment to coordinate it, build it and coordinate it. And so there would be a special page on there for coordinators. And we're still deciding whether we want that to be an intranet or password protected kind of site, to preserve a little bit of that like safe place to ask questions element. And I believe that UC San Diego's training grant website has a lot of those features. So that's kind of our goal
Model.
model. Yes. Anyone else open to sharing any of these aspects of their role? Scholar facing, managing data tables, things that I'm really interested in the question of, like, what do people come to you for that you do not do?
I just, if I may add as a bridge to that, I apologize, I do have to go shortly. I just want to say I appreciate this conversation of where we're at right now because I feel like it's alluding to something that, if I'm honest, as someone who doesn't mind speaking, feels that I don't always get to address unless there's other coordinators in the room, in the sense that I think a unique pressure of this job, and not saying other university positions don't have this, but there's a lot of pressure as the T32 coordinator where I can't sometimes just submit something and think, oh, well, I'll get a chance to fix that. It never feels like that, really. And that's not on my PI. That's, I think, just also the current state of being a T32 coordinator at this time in and point of the for working at learning institutions, the margin for error as a T32 coordinator seems very, very slim, and growing even slimmer. Where, if I'm honest to speak plain, I feel like part of the shadow of this dialogue is how do I justify me staying in my role? How do I not be put forth as a pawn or a sacrifice to the greater funding entity, whether that's the UC, my campus, or the NIH? Um, that is something I don't feel I can speak plainly about. And I think, again, I'm very lucky. I enjoy working with my PI. And let's be honest about the dynamic at times between staff at a university and the other competing interests. Um, I try and be very much a realist about it. And there are people who have been doing T32 administration almost their entire career. And to be at the time where we're at, where that again may not be as seen for its full value, and rather is something that can be picked apart as part of just keeping T32s alive, which again is understandable, but completely erases um, the ripple, the iceberg analogy, right? Where there's what T32s are coordinators are seen doing on the surface. But I think, it's been spoken at multiple meetings of when a coordinator leaves, that impact is felt not just then, but for many years after in a variety of ways. So I'm just grateful that we can start to have more of an honest conversation about this because I feel like sometimes um, that human element is not being addressed because we're all trying to keep focused on the bigger things at hand. But I won't lie, it stings sometimes. It stings when I hear about a shared services model. I understand it. It does not make me feel valued, though, nor the colleagues who are doing far more intensive work than I do. Um, so thank you uh, for letting me share.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, I think as a manager, one of the things that I need to work within is how many programs does each person run, and what happens if one of the programs goes away, or what happens if something changes in the budget available for a particular program, because there are actual people, right, as well as like the budget line. Um, and for the most part, I'm working with the actual people, um, and having to translate that to the budget line. And I think that there's a just as we're working to become eloquent in the value of the T32 of the training grant as a way that researchers are fostered into independence, I think that we can also become more eloquent in the value of the work that we do, the particular value of the work that we do, and the value of institutional knowledge. And I'd be interested in hearing people's thoughts about how exactly we go about doing that. Apart from assuring each other here today that we see what you've overcome to have the successes that you've had. Holly, I wonder if you'd be open to sharing from your particular vantage point.
I was just typing in the chat that on this particular front, as far as appreciation is concerned, or the weight of what we as administrators do, I was saying that in order to influence or allow, I guess, others to see what we need, want, hope for, what impact we have, I always jump on my soapbox issues whenever I have just the thinnest of opportunities to do so. And just by way of information, I think Luna Fuller is my partner in crime. Jill is our fearless leader oftentimes, even though we're not on the same teams. But Luna and I work for the Department of Medicine, specifically for the sponsored project office. And technically, we are considered fund managers, but we are not pre-award or post-award. We are fund managers only for institutional training grants. And we do everything from the beginning of pre-award to the closeout wrap up, final financial report process. And the interesting thing, they just created our position, and we work with training grants in the Department of Medicine, not across the entire university. Jill kind of sees all of those other grants. We talk to people about them, but we are focused in the Department of Medicine. And as an administrator in a new position, specifically to help our teammates, the other fund managers, survive all of the aspects of training grants, which, as everybody here knows, are very, very complicated and fiddly and painful to propose, to manage, to close. Ever since they started this position, the PIs have been incredibly grateful, because I think mostly because their admins aren't as angry as they were about these training grants. So our portfolio right now, we cover all of the T32s in the Department of Medicine. We just have a TL1 that just started that's shared between 3 institutions. And we have a T35 that is only a summer program for second-year medical students. And we have another T35 that we're applying for soon. But I think, like I said, at least my experience has very much been that the squeaky wheel gets the grease and the squeaky wheels get the appreciation, because I think mostly we're not complaining. We're going to PIs or whatever work group that we can elbow our way into and proposing instead of complaining. And unfortunately, proposals generally, most of them require money. And so what we're doing along with Jill is trying to find and build up champions for our cause, who generally are faculty. But we can't make the noise we need to make to get things changed without using faculty as loudspeakers for our cause. So I've been very passionate about training grants. I've been very passionate about the problems administratively, those created by NIH, those created by our individual institutions. And I think that, I'm really excited that we have this consortium gradually growing in size and enthusiasm and participation. And it's heartening, because when you're working, on your specific training grants or with your specific PI or whatever it is that you're doing in your little world, you can feel really isolated and frustrated. And while the larger group doesn't decrease the frustration necessarily. It does help all of us to feel less isolated. And it also gives us a place to go for help. So, did I say anything that you wanted me to say, Rachel?
No, but I feel better. Than when you
My job.
than when you started talking. It's that soapbox.
My soapbox.
The
I've got a couple.
I am curious to hear, Holly, from your position supporting a number of different training grants. Do you feel like you're ready to reflect on like the variability that you see among different
Oh,
grants
am I?
in terms of administrative structure?
Yes, I mean, that is one of our principal problems. And, it's obviously not just a problem at our institution, but one of the main problems that we are con continuously untangling is that every single one of our divisions within the Department of Medicine handles appointments, handles discrepancies, handles training in entirely different ways, which are not consistent. So we've had plenty of problems. I guess the things that we don't do at this point, I can't assume that anyone in any division is going to understand what their responsibilities are as far as training grants are concerned. And so, because, like I said, everything's different between every division. So you've got some divisions that have a program coordinator who does all of the interactions with the scholars and make sure that everything's running within their division correctly, but they don't necessarily track the information that I need when it comes time to submit a renewal, because they're the ones who are supposed to be keeping all of that data, and they don't. There are various levels of understanding about the data that divisions are supposed to be keeping and collecting on their training grants. I've had divisions that had a very bizarre or division admins who had a very strange understanding of what information they needed to collect and how they were supposed to collect it. I mean, the worst example I can think of is someone who gave me a list of diversity numbers where they had they'd assigned their impression of whether or not each higher scholar was diverse. It was it's things like that. And I have a handful of admins who fortunately have gotten over it, but initially seemed to be terrified that I was going to take their job when that's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to support the training grants and refused to share the information with me that I needed in order to do whatever task it was I was working on because they were afraid I was going to undermine their position in their division. And I work with the sponsored projects office. My job is to support all of the training grants in the Department of Medicine, not take somebody's job in one particular division. But interrupt, please. Yes, I'm just babbling.
Okay. I appreciate, I want to just like acknowledge, like I heard what Alex was saying about, the question of value and the question of budget cuts and restructuring and the moving of cheese, to borrow the terrible 1990s metaphor. Holly, would it be fair to say that you are thinking of your job not as a cheese mover, but as a maze clarifier?
That's a really good. So I think of myself.
We're not moving the goalpost. We're like, the idea is not to reduce the number of coordinators, but to make the coordinators who are on the ground in the maze, um,
I feel like my job
less
is to
stress.
I'm trying to give them directions to make their way through the maze, not to give them a goal at the end, but I'm trying to tell them which way to turn and trying to let them know where they can go. I'm trying to provide a lot of information. big picture wise and in detail so that I can help with very, very specific scholar funding problems. I can help with very, very vague general, how do I get this information? Where is it at NIH? And um, so for the program coordinators who are working specifically with these training grants while I am the fund manager, I'm I feel like my job is to be both a problem solver and an educator. So my position and my value add is that I'm helping the people who are face to face with the scholars, for example, which I'm not ever. Well, I talk to them, but I'm not their primary first contact. Um, I'm trying to help them understand why they're doing what they're doing while providing both support. If they're frustrated because they can't get information or fix something or change something, then I view it, we universally view our roles as the training grant fund managers as like all inclusive support. We're not necessarily doing everything for everybody, but we're trying to make it less painful for them to do what they're doing.
Thank you. I want to leave room for any other coordinators. I think particularly scholar-facing coordinators to talk about their. Are you doing something that you haven't heard anybody in the room talking about yet? What are the stories that we haven't heard yet? And then I'd like to talk for a few minutes before we close about what would be helpful next steps. Okay, thank you. Um, so we've heard, let's see, a couple of themes in the room that I've heard are wearing many hats, that people often yes, I see Marguerite also helping with annual RPPRs. So themes in the room. How could we streamline access to programming such that it doesn't such that it might not fall so heavily on an individual coordinator to be developing programming or to be designing curriculum, which is something that I've witnessed a coordinator tasked with myself, and it just feels like that's a PI thing, and the PIs are too busy to do it. So, perhaps there's a way that we could join forces and make sure our CR is covered well, or the resilient scientist training that Alex mentioned, I think is brilliant. And I wish that all training grant participants could have access to that. And I think it would also be a great idea for them to meet other people in a training grant. And that would be another way to amplify the benefit of being part of a training grant, because they could speak to each other and become legible. Their experience, the value of their experience could become legible in their interaction with each other. That they see what are they getting that they wouldn't have been getting outside of a training grant. What are they receiving in common with each other? I also hear a lot of pressure in terms of just the nature of a grant funded position. It's the nature of the training grants that they're grant funded, and they go in for renewal or not all the time. Um, and what could we do to make that experience more survivable? What could we do to mitigate some of the consequences of that volatility and pressure, right? One of which is turnover, one of which is burnout. Yes, I'm really interested. I don't know, like I'm kind of thinking about like an article about like what happens when a coordinator leaves? What are all of the things that need to be cleaned up and passed on and you know relearned when a coordinator leaves? And I think I don't know. I need to think about it if there's a way to do that without placing the blame on the individual coordinator and making it more about what systemically could we do to make these positions um, easier to learn, easier to enter, easier to succeed in, and easier to survive.
Centralized data collection and expectations.
Just a clear conversation about expectations, I think would be helpful.
Mm. Um, I would like to just say something, even though there are clear expectations to start with. By the time you're working in the training grants and it's about time to submit, and there are a lot of things missing, and all the clear expectations goes out of the window because you need to finish everything and it has to go out. So it's not that easy.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, our role is primarily during the pre-award process. We are program coordinators trying to make sure that everybody has those expectations, knows what they are, and are fulfilling them. And it's very, very hard to do.
Jürgen, Holly, are we talking about the seasonality of the program coordinator work, that there are some seasons that are so much more intense that it's like the expectations in terms of workload can get blurry at the
Kind
end?
of. I would say, I don't know what Yurga was coming at it from, but I would say ultimately, since I'm the coordinator, not in position, but in, not in title, but in effect, I'm the project coordinator for everybody involved working on it. And so it is ultimately my responsibility to get everything completed that the PI expects to be completed. So I'm the one who winds up working 14-hour days if balls get dropped other places. But at the same time, it seems like it's my responsibility as the program or the project coordinator to try to prevent the balls from having gotten dropped in the first place. So, but there isn't, I guess, a central or a common shared expectation for that work when it is seasonal. I always start out meeting with a team and asking how much time per week I can get to put towards preparing an application from each person who is involved.
Thank you, Yurka. Are these conversations, Holly, that like in an ideal world would be happen? I'm trying to think about like who would communicate this with someone? Should that be
That's
the coordinator's manager, the Office of Research, the
the
PI?
problem. Yeah, I mean, that's why our position exists because, um, my immediate supervisor, while, she has, decades of experience with submitting awards, submitting, grant proposals, she doesn't have immediate one-on-one experience with processing a training grants through a renewal or a new application. I mean, there's so many details involved. And that's why when I start a project, when we start preparing for a renewal or a new application, we have a meeting where we sit down and I draw up a list of who's responsible for what. And then in an ideal situation, we talk every week and I check on who has done what where to make sure it's all getting done. And it does seasonally, it does run into problems because I can't, when I have 3 grants going in, for example, I can't throw the same amount of my personal effort at each grant in order to ensure. I have to follow up to make sure they're doing, getting things done so that it coalesces into a finished project. But yeah, I think that it can't, because of the nature of the grant and because that those major issues are seasonal and take months and months and months of effort to finalize. It needs to be, I think that I feel like we're moving in the right direction, having a centralized team that is basically supervising. And I think that Kelly's group at UCLA is very similar to, at least they're only doing pre-award, but it's a similar project management focus that we are working on. And ours is a bit broader because we do post-award as well, but there needs, and I guess, I don't, Kelly can agree or disagree, but I would think that the UCLA would run into problems with the training grant PIs who aren't using their services, perhaps.
Like, I guess yes and no. Those who don't use nobody's obligated to use our services. And so if they don't, their success or their, weaknesses or what have you kind of fall to them in the department. And so, we are, I guess, kind of in a privileged spot in that we support the projects that come to us or that we're tapped, through the dean's priorities. But we do have the benefit of not being obligated to support every single one of those 15 grants in May, nor would we be able to if they all came to us.
Yeah.
In the absence of so one might be wishing in their heart at this moment for a Kelly or a Holly, and facing the mountain that is change, structural change. I wonder whether this group in the meantime, I wonder if it'd be helpful to coordinate cohorts based on grant submission deadline. Like if someone is in the moment of coordinating for a renewal or coordinating for a submission, could we put those people in a room together? Preferably with preferably with at least one mentor coordinator who has done it before, and support each other through that special experience.
I like that idea. I think that I think that I guess I can see value in having a sounding board that is larger than just my little team when we run into problems or want to share solutions to problems we've discovered. Yeah, I like that idea.
There might be more stickiness or attraction for the people who don't see themselves as a T32 coordinator or administrator, but they're tasked with submitting a T32 right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might not find that this group right here would speak to them because of that title, but
right.
They're submitting a T32 for May. Okay, yes, that is me.
Could we, I don't know what we have planned for January, but could we talk about maybe the next meeting or the meeting after that of this group being to hash out what would somebody need if they were in the process of, if they were facing down submitting a training grant?
Yeah, that's what Jill's office hours have a tendency to look very much like that as we come down to deadlines. But I have a tendency to bail on those when I'm coming down to deadlines. So
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I see that we're at the hour. I understand people have other meetings they need to run off to. I really appreciate this discussion. This has been really valuable for me.
Thank you for your leadership, Rachel. Thank you,
Great.
everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Rachel.
Oh,
I can't even talk. I'm like,
I'm so sorry, Jill.
and,
I'll
like all days, I'm like, I could really like, get on my soapbox, but maybe it's better that I don't. So it's good
I
to hear
really
a lot of other people participate, which was good.
I really admire your self-restraint. I have such a hard time not talking when I'm asking questions. So I think that so I'll email the coordinating group and suggest that one of our upcoming meetings um, look at the idea of providing special support for people who are in the throes of submitting.
For sure. For sure.
Thank you. Thanks very much,
Okay.
Jill. We'll see you
See you
soon.
later. Bye-bye.